English title. My son accused me of loving his brother more. So I revealed the secret his perfect brother was keeping to save him. Vietnamese title. Con tre de toi yuan no han. Nen toi de tit lobi mat manuoi on hon how quano de ju kin de qm min. The alley smelled of wet garbage and regret. Rain slicked the grimy brick walls, making them gleam under the single, flickering bulb above a rusted service door. My son, Liam, was pressed against those bricks, looking so much smaller than his 20 years. His breath plumed in the cold air, each one a fragile cloud of panic. Facing him was a man who seemed to be carved from shadow and sharp angles. His name was Vince, a name I would come to know later, a name that would forever be etched into my nightmares. He wasn't yelling. He didn't have to. His voice was a low rumble, the kind that vibrates in your bones and promises pain without ever raising its volume. Time's up, Kit, Vince said, taking a slow step forward. Liam flinched. I've been patient. My associates, they're not as patient as I am. He smiled. Thin, cruel slash in the darkness. You understand what I'm saying, right? We know where you live. We know about your mom, the school counselor. We know about your brother, Mr. Perfect Accountant. Liam's face, illuminated by the sickly yellow light, was a mask of pure terror. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. All the bravado, all the anger I'd seen from him for months, had evaporated, leaving only a scared, cornered boy. I'll get it, Liam finally stammered, his voice cracking. I just need a little more time. Vince chuckled. A dry, rasping sound. Time is the one thing you've run out of. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more menacing than a shout. Friday, or we pay your family a visit. And we won't be bringing flowers. He straightened up, adjusted the collar of his leather jacket, and turned away, melting back into the darkness as silently as he had appeared. Liam was left alone, sliding down the wet brick wall until he was sitting in a puddle of filthy water, his head in his hands. The single light above him flickered once, twice, and then went out, plunging him into complete darkness. A week earlier, our kitchen had been filled with a different kind of light. The warm, golden glow of late afternoon sun streamed through the window above the sink, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was a peaceful scene, the kind you see in a catalog for suburban living. I was chopping vegetables for a stew, the rhythmic thud of the knife on the cutting board a familiar, comforting sound. The air smelled of onions and celery and the faint, sweet scent of the last of the summer roses from the garden. It was a fragile peace, though. I felt it in my shoulders. Constant, low-grade tension that never fully went away. It was the peace of a ceasefire, not of true harmony. The back door opened and Ethan came in, dropping his briefcase by the door with a soft thud. My older son, 23 years old, and he already carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man twice his age. His shirt was crisp, his tie was perfectly knotted, and his hair was neatly combed. He looked tired, but it was the good kind of tired, the satisfying exhaustion that comes from a productive day at work. Hey, Mom, he said, coming over to kiss my cheek. His smelled of clean laundry and the sterile air of his office. Smells good. Hey, sweetie. Rough day? I asked, smiling at him. The usual. End of quarter reports. He opened the fridge and pulled out a bottle of water. Anything I can do to help? You can set the table. Liam should be down any minute. Ethan's smile tightened just a fraction. A barely perceptible change that I, as his mother, knew all too well. It was the look he got whenever Liam's name came up. A mixture of responsibility, frustration, and a deep, weary love. Is he awake? Ethan asked, his voice neutral. He is now, I said, my own voice a little too bright. I heard him moving around upstairs. Moving around was a generous term. What I'd actually heard was a muffled curse, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. It was the usual soundtrack to Liam's afternoons. While Ethan was out building a future, Liam, 20, was in his bedroom, sleeping away the days and living a life I couldn't seem to penetrate. My husband, Mark, would have known what to do. Mark had always been the one who understood Liam's restless energy, his fears, often misguided, passions. He'd been the fun parent, the one who'd take Liam to the skate park or build ridiculous ramps in the backyard. I was the practical one, the one who enforced homework and curfews. After Mark passed away from a heart attack 3 years ago, that dynamic became set in stone. Ethan stepped into the role of the responsible man of the house, and I became the full-time warden. Liam just drifted. As if on cue, we heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Liam appeared in the kitchen doorway. Where Ethan was all sharp lines and neatness, Liam was a blur of soft edges and disarray. His t-shirt was wrinkled, his dark hair a messy tangle that he hadn't bothered to brush, and his eyes were shadowed with a weariness that had nothing to do with productive work. It was the exhaustion of someone who fought battles all night in the glow of a computer screen. "Morning," he grunted, shuffling to the coffee pot and finding it empty. He shot a resentful look at the pot, as if it had personally offended him. "It's 5 in the afternoon. Honey," I said gently. "I'm making stew for dinner." "Not hungry," he mumbled, opening the pantry and rummaging around. He emerged with a crumpled bag of chips and a can of soda. His dinner of choice. I felt the familiar pang of failure. I was a high school guidance counselor. I spent my days advising teenagers on their futures, helping them navigate the treacherous waters of adolescence. I could listen to other people's children for hours, offering advice and support. But with my own son, I was at a total loss. Every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. "So, how was work?" I tried, turning back to my vegetables. "It was fine," Liam said, his mouth full of chips. He was working part-time at a bookstore cafe. It was his 3rd job in the last year. The Othersa stock boy at a grocery store, a cashier at a gas station had ended abruptly, with vague explanations about jerk managers or boring work. "Just fine," I pushed, unable to help myself. "Did you talk to your manager about getting more hours?" He stiffened, his jaw set in that stubborn line that was so much like his father's. "Nope." "Liam, we talked about this. That apartment you want isn't going to pay for itself. You need a steady income." "I know, Mom. You don't have to tell me every 5 minutes." He crushed the soda can in his hand with a sudden, violent motion that made me jump. The sound echoed in the quiet kitchen. Ethan, who had been silently setting out plates, put down a fork with a soft click. "Easy, Liam," he said, his voice calm but firm. Liam whirled on him. "Don't you easy. Liam me, Mr. Perfect. Not all of us can sit in a comfy office chair all day and push numbers around." "It pays the bills," Ethan said, his gaze steady. He didn't raise his voice. He never did. That was the most infuriating thing about him. From Liam's perspective, his unshakable calm. It was like throwing rocks at a mountain. "Yeah, well, I have other plans," Liam shot back, his voice dripping with defensive pride. "Bigger plans than being a corporate drone." "What plans, Liam?" I asked, my voice softer now, tinged with a desperate hope. "Tell me about them." For a second, a flicker of something else crossed his face. A hint of excitement. "Maybe. It's an investment. A friend of mine has this online thing going. It's a sure bet. I just need a little capital to get started." My heart sank. I'd heard this before. The sure bets, the can't miss opportunities. They always required capital. and they never panned out. We don't have a little capital to spare right now. Honey, I said as gently as I could. The property tax bill is due, and the car needs new brakes. The hopeful flicker in his eyes died, replaced by a familiar, sullen anger. Of course, he sneered. There's never any money for me. But I bet if Ethan needed it for one of his investments, the checkbook would pop right open. That's not fair. And you know it, I said, my voice rising despite myself. My hand tightened on the knife. Ethan has never asked me for a dime since he started working. Yeah, because he doesn't have to. He's the golden boy. He gets everything he wants. Liam threw the crushed can into the recycling bin with such force that it rattled the whole container. Forget it. I don't know why I even bother. He stormed out of the kitchen and back up the stairs, the sound of his bedroom door slamming shut like a gunshot. Silence descended upon the kitchen again, thicker and more suffocating this time. I stood there, my knuckles white on the handle of the knife, staring at the half-chopped carrots on the board. I could feel Ethan's eyes on me. I'm sorry, Mom, he said quietly. I shook my head, taking a deep, shaky breath. It's not your fault, Ethan. It's not. But whose fault was it? I looked at my older son. So responsible. So steady. The rock I had clung to since Mark died. And then I thought of my younger son, locked away in his room, simmering in a rage I couldn't understand and a desperation I couldn't soothe. Felt like I was trying to hold two different worlds together. And my arms were getting tired. The smell of the stew, which had seemed so comforting moments before, now just smelled like a lie. A lie about a happy, normal family having dinner together. A lie that was becoming harder and harder to believe. The days that followed were cold. Not just in the way late autumn in Ohio can be, with a sharp wind that cuts through your coat, but cold inside the house. The argument had left a layer of frost over everything. We moved around each other like strangers in a boarding house. Our words brief and functional. Is there any milk left? I'll be home late. We didn't have conversations. We exchanged data points. Liam was a ghost. He only emerged from his room for food or to leave the house. His headphones clamped over his ears like a shield. The one time I tried to talk to him, placing a hand on his arm as he reached for the front door, he flinched as if burned. I'm busy, Mom, he'd muttered, not looking at me, and pulled the door shut behind him. The click of the lock felt like a final judgment. I threw myself into my work at the school, surrounding myself with the manageable problems of other people's children. I listened to a sophomore girl cry about a fight with her best friend. I helped a senior fill out his college applications. I mediated a dispute between two boys who had shoved each other in the hallway. I was good at this. I could see the shape of their problems, the clear lines of cause and effect. I could offer solutions that made sense. But when I came home to the suffocating silence of my own house, I felt like a complete and utter fraud. Ethan was my silent partner in this misery. He kept to his routine work, gym, dinner, then often back to his laptop in his room. But I saw the strain in the set of his jaw, the dark circles under his eyes that even a good night's sleep couldn't erase. He was worried, too. He'd watch the stairs, waiting for a sign of Liam that never came. He'd pick at his food, his mind clearly somewhere else. We were two people in a lifeboat, watching the third member of our crew drift further and further away, and neither of us knew how to throw him a rope. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. I was paying bills at the kitchen table. The grim reality of our finances spread out before me. The property tax notice, the estimate for the new brakes on the car, the credit card statement that was higher than I'd hoped. I felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my chest. It had been a constant companion since Mark died. This feeling of being one unexpected expense away from disaster. I heard footsteps, hesitant ones. I looked up to see Liam standing in the doorway. It was the first time he had sought me out in over a week. He looked awful. His skin was pale and clammy, and his eyes were wide with a frantic, hunted look I'd never seen before. He was twisting the hem of his sweatshirt in his hands, his knuckles white. "Mom?" he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Liam." "Hi, sweetie. Are you okay?" I asked, my heart giving a hopeful little leap. Maybe he was here to apologize. Maybe this was the breakthrough. "Yeah, I'm fine. It's just my car." He wouldn't meet my eyes, focusing instead on a spot on the floor. "It's been making this weird noise. I took it to the shop today." "Oh?" I said, my guard going up instantly. It was the way he said it. The rehearsed, flat tone. "The transmission is shot," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "The guy said it's a miracle I even made it there. He said it's gonna be expensive to fix. Really expensive." I put down my pen. How expensive is really expensive? "Liam?" He finally looked at me, and his eyes were pleading. $2,000, he said, the number hanging in the air between us, heavy and impossible. He needs the money up front to order the parts. $2,000. I glanced at the pile of bills on the table. I might as well have been trying to find $2,000 on the moon. "Liam." I started, my voice failing me. "I don't have that kind of money just lying around. You know that. The taxes are due." I know, he said, his voice rising with desperation. "But I need my car. Mom, how am I supposed to get to work? How am I supposed to do anything? Please, I'll pay you back. I swear. Every single penny." Something was wrong. The story felt thin. The panic in his eyes too raw for a broken transmission. This wasn't about a car. This was about something else. Something bigger and scarier. "Can we get a second opinion?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Maybe take it to the dealership?" His face hardened instantly. The desperation was replaced by that familiar flash of anger. "So you don't believe me? Is that it? You think I'm lying?" I didn't say that. "Liam, I just think $2,000 is a lot of money, and we need to be careful." "Forget it," he spat, turning to leave. "Just forget I asked. I'll figure it out myself." "Liam, wait." I called after him, but he was already halfway up the stairs. The door slammed again, rattling the pictures on the wall. I sat there for a long time, staring at the bills, my heart aching. My son was in some kind of trouble, real trouble, and he was lying to me about it. And my refusal to help, my inability to help, had just pushed him even further away. I put my head in my hands and felt the hot sting of tears. A few minutes later, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Ethan. He'd come in so quietly I hadn't even heard him. He looked from me to the bills on the table, then toward the stairs. He didn't have to ask what happened. He already knew. I told him anyway, the words spilling out in a tired, defeated rush. I told him about the car, the $2,000, the lie in Liam's eyes. "I don't know what to do," I finished, my voice thick with unshed tears. "I feel like I'm failing him." Ethan listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he just stood there, a silent statue of filial concern. Then, he did something that surprised me. He squeezed my shoulder gently and said, "Wait here." He went up to his room. I heard a drawer open and close. When he came back down, he was holding a plain white envelope. It was thick. He placed it on the table in front of me, right on top of the property tax bill. "What's this?" I asked, confused. "It's the money," he said, his voice low and even. "Give it to him." I stared at him, then at the envelope. "Ethan, where did you get this? This is This is a lot of money. I've been saving, he said, his gaze unwavering, for a down payment on a condo. But this is more important. Just give it to him. Mom, please. It wasn't a request. It was a plea. But it was also a command. There was a weight in his voice. A deep, painful certainty that frightened me. He knew something I didn't. He was looking at a different set of facts. Playing a different game with higher stakes. The condo he'd been so excited about. The one he showed me listings for on his phone, he was willing to give that up for this. For Liam. My head was spinning. This felt wrong. Like I was enabling whatever bad decision Liam was making. But the look in Ethan's eyes, the sheer force of his quiet insistence, overrode my own judgment. He was my rock, my steady, responsible son. If he thought this was necessary, who was I to argue? With a heavy heart, I took the envelope. It felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I walked to the bottom of the stairs, my hand trembling slightly. Liam, I called out. Can you come down here? Please. A moment later, he appeared at the top of the stairs, his face sullen and wary. He came down slowly, reluctantly, stopping a few feet away from me. I held out the envelope. Here, I said, my voice unsteady. For the car. He stared at the envelope, then at my face. His eyes narrowed in suspicion. He took it from my hand, his fingers brushing against mine. He tore it open and his eyes widened as he saw the stacks of $100 bills inside. A wave of relief washed over his face, so profound it was almost painful to watch. For a single, beautiful second, I thought this was it. The moment of gratitude. The moment things would turn around. But then his eyes flickered past me, toward the kitchen doorway where Ethan was standing, watching us. The relief on Liam's face vanished, instantly replaced by a look of pure, corrosive bitterness. His lip curled. This is from him, isn't it? He said, his voice dangerously quiet. He didn't need an answer. He waved the envelope of cash in the air. Saint Ethan. Of course. Coming to rescue his screw-up little brother again. And you just went right along with it. Liam. That's not, I started. But he cut me off. His voice rising to a shout. Don't lie to me. It's always him. You trust him. You listen to him. You help him. You probably co-signed on his fancy car and didn't even think twice. He took a step closer. His face contorted with a pain and rage that seemed years in the making. He wasn't just talking about the money anymore. He was talking about everything. He shoved the cash back into the envelope and looked at me, his eyes shining with tears of fury. Mi luan jepan I. Mi luk now kung yuan I han. You always help him. You always love him more. The words, screamed in a mixture of English and the Vietnamese our mother used when we were children, struck me with the force of a physical blow. They echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of the house. He didn't throw the money down. He clutched it in his fist like a weapon, turned, and ran out the front door, slamming it so hard the house seemed to shake. I stood there, frozen, my hand still outstretched as if I were still holding the envelope. The accusation hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. I looked over at Ethan, who was leaning against the doorframe, his face pale. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the front door. And for the first time, I saw the perfect mask of my responsible son crack, revealing the profound, unbearable weight underneath. My heart didn't just break. It shattered into a million tiny, irreparable pieces. The front door was still vibrating from the slam when the silence rushed in to take its place. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a vacuum, heavy and absolute, sucking all the air and warmth from the house. I stood frozen in the hallway, Liam's accusation echoing in my head, a cruel mantra on a loop. You always love him more. I finally turned to look at Ethan. He was still leaning in the kitchen doorway, but he looked Smaller. The confident, capable man had vanished, replaced by a tired, burdened young man. The pale fluorescent light of the kitchen cast long shadows across his face, making him look gaunt. He finally met my gaze, and in his eyes, I saw a sorrow so profound it stole my breath. It wasn't just sadness for the fight. It was something older, deeper, a weariness that didn't belong on a 23-year-old's shoulders. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice a dry rasp. "What is going on? What is this really about?" He straightened up, breaking the eye contact. The mask of composure slipped back into place, but the cracks were still visible. "He's just upset. Mom. He'll cool down. He'll be back." "Don't," I said, my voice gaining a bit of strength. "Don't you dare patronize me. This wasn't just him being upset. This was something else. And that money, why were you so desperate for me to give it to him? What does he need it for?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure exhaustion. "I can't, Mom." "You can't? Or you won't?" The question was sharp, accusatory. "It's not my story to tell," he said, his voice flat. He walked past me, picked up his briefcase from where he'd dropped it earlier. "I have some work to finish. I'm going to bed." "Ethan, we need to talk about this," I called after him, following him to the base of the stairs. He stopped, his back to me. "Talking won't fix it," he said, without turning around. "Just let it go. Please. For tonight. Just let it go." And then he was gone. His footsteps heavy on the stairs until his own bedroom door clicked shut. 2 closed doors. 2 sons, locked away in their separate worlds, leaving me alone in the ruins of our family. I sank onto the bottom step, the cold wood seeping through my jeans. The house was a tomb. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator. A lonely, mechanical heartbeat in the suffocating quiet. Liam's words came back to me. "You always love him more." Was it true? My mind drifted back through the years. I saw Ethan, 7, meticulously organizing his baseball cards while 4-year-old Liam finger-painted a masterpiece on the living room wall. I saw Ethan, 15, quietly doing his homework at the kitchen table while I pleaded with 12-year-old Liam to please stop trying to skateboard down the roof. After Mark died, the gap between them had widened into a chasm. Ethan became my co-pilot, helping with finances, fixing leaky faucets, reminding me to take out the trash. He never complained. He was my rock. Liam became a storm. He raged against the loss of his father, against my grief, against the new, quiet order of our lives. I was so busy trying to keep the ship from sinking that I clung to the anchor. I clung to Ethan. Had I mistaken his quiet strength for a lack of need? Had I mistaken Liam's loud cries for help as simple rebellion? The line between support and favoritism, between responsibility and neglect, had blurred without me even noticing. The truth was, Liam was right. Not in the way he thought. Perhaps. I didn't love Ethan more. But I had leaned on him more. I had trusted him more. I had treated him like an equal, while I still treated Liam like a problem to be solved. The realization was a cold, hard stone in my stomach. Liam didn't come home that night. Or the next day. I called his phone a dozen times. It went straight to voicemail every time. I texted him, "Please just let me know you're safe." The messages remained unread. The panic that had been simmering in my chest began to boil. Where was he? Sleeping in his car? On a friend's couch? The $2,000 was with him. A lump sum of cash that made him a target. Ethan acted like everything was normal. Forced, brittle normalcy that was worse than the silence. He made coffee in the morning. He asked if I needed anything from the store. But his eyes were constantly darting to the front door. To his phone. He was waiting. 2. We were co-conspirators in a shared anxiety. But the secret between us remained a wall, preventing any real comfort. On Saturday afternoon, I was trying to lose myself in the garden, pulling weeds with a vengeance, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. My heart leaped, thinking it was Liam calling from a friend's phone. "Hello?" I answered, my voice breathless. There was a pause, filled with the crackle of a bad connection. Then, a man's voice, low and gravelly, like stones grinding together. "Is this Sarah?" "Yes." "Who is this?" "Let's just say I'm a business associate of your son's, Liam." My blood ran cold. This wasn't a friend. "What do you want?" I asked, my hand tightening on the phone. "What I want," the man said with a chilling lack of emotion, "is what I'm owed. Your boy made some promises he couldn't keep. That money he got a couple days ago? That was a nice down payment. A gesture of good faith. But it's not even close to the full amount." My mind reeled. Down payment? I don't understand. What are you talking about? The man let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Don't play dumb, lady. It's not a good look. He's in deep. To some very serious people. People who don't like to be kept waiting. You have 1 week to get us the rest. 20,000. 20,000. The number was so absurd I almost laughed. It was a phantom. A figure from another reality. "That's impossible. We don't have that kind of money." "Then you better get creative," the man said, his voice turning hard as steel. "Sell a car. Second mortgage. I don't care. Just get it. Or the next conversation we have won't be on the phone. Do you understand me?" I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up. "I asked if you understand me." He repeated, louder this time. "Yes." I managed to choke out. "Good. 1 week." The line went dead. I stood in the garden, the phone still pressed to my ear. The cheerful chirping of birds around me a grotesque counterpoint to the terror icing my veins. $20,000. It wasn't about a car transmission. It wasn't about a small investment. It was a debt. A huge, dangerous debt. And Ethan knew. That's what the envelope was for. Not to fix a car, but to buy time. To appease a shark. The fear was a physical thing. A cold hand squeezing my heart. But underneath the fear, something else was kindling anger. A hot, clear flame of rage. My sons had been keeping this from me. They had been handling this disaster, whatever it was, on their own, leaving me in the dark, treating me like a fragile old woman who couldn't handle the truth. They were trying to protect me. Maybe, but what they'd actually done was leave me powerless. No more. I marched back into the house. My mindset. I found Ethan in the living room, staring blankly at a football game on TV. "We need to talk," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. I turned off the TV. He looked up, startled by my tone. "Mom, what's wrong?" "I just got a phone call, Ethan, from a man who wants $20,000. A man who says Liam is in deep with serious people." The color drained from Ethan's face. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He dropped his head into his hands. "Oh, God," he whispered. "Tell me what's going on," I demanded, standing over him. "Right now. No more lies. No more secrets. What has he done?" Ethan looked up at me, his face a mess of conflict and despair. "I promised him I wouldn't tell you." "I don't care what you promised him." I was shouting now, the sound raw in the quiet room. "He is in danger. We are in danger. Your promise doesn't matter more than his life. What is it? Drugs? A loan shark?" "It's gambling," he finally said, the word barely audible. "Online gambling. Started small, a few hundred here and there. But it got out of control. He kept chasing his losses, thinking the next big win was just around the corner. He's been doing it for over a year. A year. He had been drowning for a year. Right under my roof. And I hadn't seen it. The late nights. The mood swings. The constant, desperate need for money. It all clicked into place. A horrifying mosaic of addiction. The $2,000. That was from you. I said. The pieces fitting together. Where did you get it? The condo savings? He nodded, not looking at me. And some other savings. I've been giving him money for months. Mom. Trying to help him get ahead of it. I thought he had it under control this time. He swore he did. He let out a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. Guess I was wrong. I sank onto the couch opposite him. The anger was still there. But it was now diluted with a wave of grief. Grief for the son I didn't know. And for the son who had been carrying this impossible burden alone. Why didn't you tell me? Ethan? I asked. My voice soft again. We could have faced this together. And say what? He shot back. His voice cracking with emotion. Hey Mom. Sorry to bother you. But Liam has gambled away a fortune and now guys who break legs for a living are after him? You've had enough to deal with since Dad died. I was trying to handle it. I was trying to be what Dad would have been. The one who fixed things. His words hit me harder than Liam's accusation. I saw it then. So clearly. He wasn't just being a responsible son. He was trying to be a substitute husband. He was trying to be Mark. He had taken on the weight of the entire family. And it was crushing him. I went to my son and for the first time in a long time, I held him while he cried. He leaned his head on my shoulder and the quiet, controlled sobs shook his whole body. He was just a boy. They were both just boys. Lost without their father. And I had been lost without my husband. And we had all been fumbling in the dark. Too proud and too scared to admit we needed each other. The confession hung in the air between us. Raw and painful. Holding Ethan. Feeling the tremors of his long-suppressed fear and exhaustion. I realized the depth of my own blindness. I had been so focused on Liam's outward turmoil that I had completely missed Ethan's silent implosion. He wasn't my rock. He was a boy playing the part of one. And the costume was tearing at the seams. After a few minutes, his sobs subsided into shuddering breaths. He pulled away, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, looking embarrassed. Sorry, he mumbled. Don't you ever apologize for that? I said fiercely, my hand on his arm. You've been carrying this alone for far too long. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. The time for grief was over. Now was the time for action. Okay. A year. You said. How much has he lost? How much have you given him? Ethan flinched, as if the question itself was a physical blow. He got up and started pacing the small living room. A caged animal. I don't know the total. First, it was small amounts. $100 for car trouble. $200 for a dentist bill. I knew he was lying. But I thought, I don't know what I thought, that it was just temporary, that he'd get it out of his system. He stopped at the window, staring out at the darkening street. About 6 months ago. Got bad. He came to me, terrified. Said he owed $5,000. I used most of my savings then to clear it. I made him promise he would stop. That he'd get help. He swore he would. But he didn't. I finished for him. The words tasting like ash. No. He just got better at hiding it. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. A few weeks ago, I noticed my old college laptop was missing from my closet. Then some of Dad's old power tools from the garage. He'd been selling things. That's when I knew he was in trouble again. Deep trouble. My stomach turned over. Mark's tools. He had loved those tools. Spending entire weekends in the garage building birdhouses and fixing chairs. Liam had sold them for gambling money. The violation of it felt profound. The $2,000 I gave him. I said quietly. That wasn't all of it, was it? The phone call said 20,000. Ethan finally turned to face me, his expression grim. The total debt is closer to 30. He'd managed to pay off a little with what he'd been selling, but, yeah, 20,000 is what's left. The 2,000 I gave you was just to stop the immediate threats, to get them off his back for a few days. $30,000. The number was a physical weight, pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. It was an insurmountable mountain. We didn't have $30,000. We didn't have a third of that. We have to call the police, I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. Ethan shook his head immediately. No. Mom, you heard the guy. They know where we live. They know about you. About me. If we go to the cops, what do you think they'll do? They'll get desperate. They'll come after him. Or worse, they'll come after you to send a message. He was right. The cold, calculated threat in the man's voice was not a bluff. These weren't petty criminals. This was organized. And they were dangerous. We were trapped. For the next hour, we sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd sat just days before agonizing over a property tax bill that now seemed laughably insignificant. We went through our finances with a grim, surgical precision. My small 401k. The meager savings account I kept for emergencies. Ethan's own depleted funds. Even if we drained everything, sold every piece of jewelry I owned, we wouldn't come close. We were thousands, tens of thousands, short. There's the house, I said quietly, the thought sending a sliver of ice through me. We could take out a home equity loan. Ethan looked at me, his eyes filled with a fierce protectiveness. No, absolutely not. This is the only thing we have left from Dad. We're not risking this house. Not for this. So what do we do? I cried, the helplessness washing over me again. We have a week. Ethan, what can we possibly do in a week? He didn't have an answer. We sat in silence, the numbers on the papers in front of us mocking our desperation. Every potential solution led to a dead end. We were out of options, out of time. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of fear and calculations. Every creak of the old house made me jump. Every car that passed on the street sounded like it was slowing down in front of our driveway. The safety of my home had been shattered. It no longer felt like a sanctuary, but a target. The next morning, I decided I couldn't just sit and wait for the axe to fall. I needed to do something. Anything. I started with Liam's room. I had respected his privacy for too long, treating his closed door like the border of a sovereign nation. That was over. I needed to understand the world he was living in. His room was a disaster zone. Piles of clothes, empty fast food containers, and energy drink cans littered the floor. But it was the desk that drew me in. His laptop was open, the screen dark. I touched the trackpad, and it flickered to life. He hadn't even bothered to log out. The screen was filled with the garish, flashing lights of an online casino website. Victory Vegas Online. Bright, cartoonish graphics promised jackpots and instant wealth. I could see the game he'd been playing, a poker simulation. His account balance was displayed in the top corner. $1.14. I clicked on the account history. My hands were shaking. It was a dizzying ledger of his descent. Deposit after deposit. $50. $100. $200. The dates stretched back for months. And then the losses. Page after page of them. A relentless river of red. Negative numbers. It was horrifying. It was like reading a diary of his addiction. Each entry a cry for help I hadn't heard. Tucked under a pile of papers, I found a crumpled, tear-stained notebook. Inside, in his frantic, messy scrawl, were his calculations. He wasn't just gambling. He was chasing a system. He had elaborate theories about odds and probabilities, desperate equations he thought would lead him to the one big win that would solve everything. It was the logic of a drowning man convincing himself that if he just swallows enough water, he'll learn how to breathe it. I closed the notebook, my heart aching with a fresh wave of pity and despair for my lost boy. As I was about to leave, something glinted from under his bed. I reached down and pulled it out. It was a small, velvet-lined box. I opened it. Inside, nestled on the faded fabric, was my grandmother's locket, the one I had given Liam on his 16th birthday. I had thought he'd lost it years ago. He hadn't lost it. He had kept it. It was the one thing he hadn't sold. Tiny, fragile sliver of hope pierced through my despair. The boy I knew, my sweet, passionate Liam, was still in there somewhere, buried under layers of debt and shame and fear. He hadn't sold the locket. That had to mean something. I went downstairs, clutching the box in my hand. Ethan was on the phone in the kitchen, his back to me. His voice was low and urgent. I understand, he was saying. No, I know you can't give me much for it. It's a 2018 model. Excellent condition. Look, I just need to know the absolute best price you can do. Today. I froze. A 2018 model. He was talking about a car. His car. The one he'd bought himself 2 years ago. His first major purchase after starting his job. He was so proud of that car. He washed it every weekend. It was his one real indulgence. A symbol of the successful life he was building. Okay, he said, his voice heavy with resignation. Yeah, I can be there in an hour. He hung up and stood for a moment with his head bowed, his hand resting on the counter. He took a deep, shaky breath before turning around. He started when he saw me standing there. Mom, I didn't see you. You're selling your car, I said. It wasn't a question. He didn't deny it. He just nodded, his jaw tight. It's the only way. A private sale would take too long. A dealership will give me cash today. It won't be enough. Not even close. But it's a start. Something. No, I said, walking toward him. Ethan, you can't. I have to, he said, his voice raw. What other choice do we have? Do you have a better idea? His challenge hung in the air, sharp and unanswerable. And in that moment, seeing the sacrifice he was about to make, the final piece of his own hard-won identity he was willing to burn to save his brother, my resolve hardened into something unbreakable. The fear was still there, but it was no longer in charge. Cold, clear certainty settled over me. They had underestimated me. The man on the phone, my own sons. They all saw me as the grieving widow, the soft-hearted mother, the school counselor who dealt in feelings and gentle advice. They were wrong. I was a mother, and my child was in danger. There was no line I wouldn't cross. Yes, I said, my voice steady and clear. I do have a better idea. We're not selling your car. We're not draining our savings. And we are not risking this house. Ethan stared at me, confused. Then what are we going to do? They're not just going to forget about the money. I know, I said. I looked past him, out the window, a plan beginning to form in the most terrifying, forbidden corners of my mind. It was a desperate, reckless gamble, a leap into the dark. But it was the only move we had left to play. We're going to get Liam, I said. And then, we're going to end this. All of it. Ethan looked at me as if I'd just started speaking in a foreign language. Get Liam? Mom, we don't even know where he is. I have an idea, I said, my mind racing, connecting dots I hadn't even realized were there. His friend, Kevin, the one he used to work with at the coffee shop. Liam mentioned him when this all started. The investment with the friend. He's always at Kevin's house when he's trying to lie low. Kevin's house was on the other side of town, A small rental in a neighborhood of nearly identical houses. I'd only dropped Liam off there once or twice, but I remembered the street. I remembered the blue trim on the windows. And what happens when we find him? Ethan asked, his voice laced with skepticism. We just bring him home? The problem doesn't go away. Mom, the people he owes money to will still be out there. I know, I said, turning to face him fully. That's the second part of the plan. I took a deep breath. That man who called me, Vince, he gave me a week. That means they don't want to get violent unless they have to. It's bad for business. They think they can scare us into paying. They think we're a typical suburban family with assets to liquidate. We are a typical suburban family, Ethan pointed out, a note of exasperation in his voice. We were. I corrected him. Now, we're a family with nothing left to lose. And that makes us unpredictable. I started pacing, the energy of the idea thrumming through me. It was a terrifying plan, born of pure desperation. But it felt right. It felt like the only path that wasn't a dead end. They're used to dealing with scared victims who follow instructions. They're not used to their victims fighting back. Fighting back how? Ethan asked, his eyes wide. Mom, these are dangerous people. Their power comes from secrecy and fear. I said, thinking aloud, the words flowing from a place of cold, maternal instinct. They operate in the shadows. We're going to drag them into the light. Before Ethan could protest further, I grabbed my purse and car keys. Let's go. We're getting your brother. The drive to Kevin's house was tense. Ethan sat silently in the passenger seat, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. He was watching me, his expression a mixture of fear and a dawning, reluctant respect. He was seeing a side of his mother he never knew existed. To be honest, I was seeing a side of myself I never knew existed. The timid, grieving woman had been burned away, leaving behind someone harder, sharper. Just as I'd suspected, Liam's beat-up sedan was parked down the street from Kevin's house, tucked away as if to avoid notice. I pulled up in front of the small, slightly run-down rental. The curtains were drawn. Stay in the car. I told Ethan. This is between me and him first. I walked up the cracked concrete path and knocked on the door. After a moment, it opened a few inches, and a young man with a wispy beard and anxious eyes peeked out. Kevin. Can I help you? He asked, clearly unnerved by the sight of his friend's mother on his doorstep. I'm here for Liam. Kevin. I said, my voice calm but unyielding. I know he's here. Kevin's eyes darted nervously back into the house. He's not feeling well. He's sleeping. Wake him up, I said. Now. My tone must have conveyed that I was not going to be put off. He hesitated for another second, then sighed and opened the door. He's in the back room. The house smelled of stale pizza and unwashed laundry. I followed Kevin down a narrow hallway to a closed door. He knocked timidly. Liam? Dude, your mom's here. There was a muffled groan from inside. Then a thud. I didn't wait for an invitation. I pushed the door open. The room was even worse than his room at home. It was a small den, lit only by the glow of a TV screen. Liam was on a mattress on the floor, surrounded by a fortress of empty chip bags and soda cans. He scrambled to sit up, blinking against the light from the hallway, looking like a cornered animal. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot and haunted. He hadn't just been hiding here. He'd been rotting. Mom? What are you doing here? He stammered, his voice hoarse. I'm taking you home, I said, my voice softer than I intended. Seeing him like this, so broken and afraid, reignited the ache in my heart. His face hardened instantly. No, I'm not going home. He scrambled to his feet, putting his back against the wall. You can't make me. Liam, I said, taking a step into the room. The stench of fear and neglect was overwhelming. I know everything. About the gambling. About the debt. About Vince. His tough facade crumbled. His whole body seemed to sag. And he slid down the wall back onto the mattress, burying his face in his hands. A choked sob escaped him. I'm so sorry, Mom. He whispered into his palms. I messed up so bad. I was going to fix it. I just needed one big win. I know. Sweetie. I know. I knelt in front of him, on the dirty carpet, and put my hand on his head, stroking his messy hair like I used to when he was a little boy with a skinned knee. But we're not going to fix it with another bet. We're going to fix it together. As a family. He looked up at me, his eyes swimming with tears and shame. How? They want so much money. We don't have it. They're going to hurt you. No, they're not, I said with a conviction I didn't fully feel. Now, get your things. We're leaving. The drive home was a study in silence. Liam sat in the back, hunched and small, staring out the window. Ethan sat in the front, rigid, looking straight ahead. It was like transporting two prisoners of war. When we got back to the house, I led them both into the living room and had them sit down. The moment of reckoning had arrived. I stood before them, my two sons, the two halves of my heart, one who had borne a secret burden, and one whose secrets had almost destroyed them all. There will be no more secrets in this house, I began, my voice ringing with authority. From now on, we face this as one. Liam, you are going to tell us everything. Every website, every name, every threat. We need to know exactly what we're up against. Hesitantly at first, then with a torrent of pent-up fear, Liam told us the whole sordid story. He named the websites, the anonymous screen names of the people he'd dealt with, and the one name that mattered, Vince. He was the local collector for the online syndicate. The muscle. The one who made sure people paid. As he talked, I saw Ethan watching him. There was no "I told you so" in his expression. There was no anger. There was only a profound, weary sadness. He was seeing the full extent of the sickness he'd been trying to treat with band-aids. When Liam was finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. He sat there, emptied out, looking smaller and younger than I'd seen him in years. Then, I turned to Ethan. And you? I said, my voice softening. You are done being the silent martyr. You are done trying to be your father. You are my son, not my husband. You are his brother, not his keeper. This burden is not yours to carry alone. Ethan looked at me, his eyes full of a relief so intense it was almost painful. He gave a small, shaky nod. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. Here is what we are going to do. I laid out the plan. It was audacious, reckless, and probably insane. But it was the only thing I could think of that gave us back a sliver of power. First, I said, looking at Liam, you're going to call him. You're going to call Vince. Liam's head snapped up, his face a mask of terror. What? No, Mom, I can't. You can. And you will. I said firmly. You're going to tell him that your family has pooled its resources. You're going to tell him you have the money. All of it. And you want to meet tonight to pay him off and be done with it. But we don't have the money. Ethan interjected, aghast. What's the point of lying? The point, I said, my gaze sharp, is to get him here. On our turf. On our terms. He thinks he's coming for a simple cash pickup from a scared family. He's expecting to be in control. And then what? Liam whispered, his voice trembling. When he shows up and we have nothing. I looked from one of my sons to the other. This was the moment they would either trust me or not. This was the moment our family would either pull together or fly apart for good. Then, I said. A cold fire in my belly. We show him what happens when you threaten the wrong family. His silence that followed my declaration was so absolute I could hear the frantic pounding of my own heart. Liam stared at me, his face ashen with terror. Ethan's expression was one of stunned disbelief. They were looking at their mother, the school counselor who baked cookies for bake sales and organized parent-teacher conferences, and seeing a stranger. Mom, this is insane. Ethan finally broke the silence, his voice a strained whisper. This isn't a movie. This guy, Vint, he's a criminal. He's dangerous. What do you think we're going to do? Fight him? No, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. We're not going to fight him with our fists. We're going to fight him with our heads. His greatest weapon is the fear he creates. He thrives on it. He isolates his victims and makes them feel helpless. We're not going to be helpless. And we're not going to be isolated. I picked up my phone from the coffee table. My fingers were trembling, but my resolve was firm. I scrolled through my contacts. Who are you calling? Liam asked, his voice barely audible. Reinforcements. I said simply. My first call was to my brother, David. He was a contractor. A big man with a booming laugh and hands like catcher's mitts. He was a gentle giant, but I knew that beneath the easygoing exterior was a fierce loyalty to his family. Hey, Sarah. He answered, his voice cheerful. What's up, sis? David, I need your help, I said, cutting straight to the point. I didn't have time for pleasantries. It's serious. It's about Liam. The cheerfulness vanished from his voice. What kind of serious? I gave him the heavily condensed version, leaving out the grimy details of the gambling but making the threat crystal clear. A man is threatening my sons. He's a loan shark. He's coming to the house tonight, expecting a payment. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could practically hear him processing the information. You call the cops? We can't, I said. It'll only make it worse. I have a plan, but I need you here. I need you to just be here, in the house. I'm on my way, he said without a second's hesitation. There was a new, hard edge to his voice. Anyone else I should call? Yes, I said. My next call was to our neighbor from across the street, Mr. Henderson. He was a retired police sergeant, a widower in his late 60s who spent most of his days tending his prize-winning roses. He was quiet and observant, and I knew for a fact he still kept his old service revolver, cleaned and oiled, in a lockbox in his nightstand. I was even more direct with him. George, it's Sarah. I have a situation here. A man is coming to my house tonight to collect on a private debt. He has made threats against my family. I'm not calling the police officially, but I would feel a lot better if a retired sergeant was having a cup of coffee in my kitchen when he arrived. There was no hesitation in his voice either. I'll be over in 20 minutes. Sarah, you just tell me when. When I hung up, I looked at my sons. Their expressions had shifted from fear to a dawning, shocked understanding. This wasn't a reckless, emotional outburst. This was a calculated strategy. Now, I said, turning to Liam, it's your turn. Make the call. I handed him his phone. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He looked from me to Ethan, then back to me. Ethan gave him a slow, almost imperceptible nod. A silent message passed between them. We're in this together. Liam took a deep, shuddering breath and dialed. He put the phone on speaker. It rang twice before a familiar, gravelly voice answered. Yeah. It's Liam. He stammered. Well, look who decided to call. Vince sneered. You got something for me, kid? Liam looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. I nodded at him. urging him on. Yeah, Liam said, his voice gaining a sliver of confidence. I do. I have it. All of it. There was a moment of surprised silence on the other end. All of it? The whole 20 grand? Vince sounded skeptical. Yes. My family. They helped me. I want to pay you. Tonight. I just want this to be over. Smart kid, Vince said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. He thought he'd won. He thought his intimidation tactics had worked perfectly. All right. I'm busy tonight. How about I swing by in an hour? Have it ready. Cash. Small bills. Okay, Liam said, his voice cracking on the single word. And kid? Vince's voice turned cold again. Don't try anything stupid. Just you, me, and the money. No one else. Understand? I understand, Liam whispered. Vince hung up. Liam dropped the phone on the couch as if it were on fire. He was pale and sweating. He's coming here, he said, the reality of it finally hitting him. Yes, he is, I said. And we're going to be ready. The next hour was a flurry of controlled activity. Ethan, galvanized into action, began moving furniture. We pushed the large sofa back against the wall, clearing the center of the living room. We turned on every light in the house, the overheads, the lamps, the entryway sconces. We were banishing every shadow. My brother David arrived first. He filled the doorway, his presence alone a comforting bulwark. He gave me a tight, worried hug and then looked at his nephews. He didn't say a word of recrimination. He just clapped a hand on each of their shoulders, a gesture of silent, unconditional support. Then, Mr. Henderson came over, carrying a thermos. He was dressed in casual slacks and a polo shirt, looking for all the world like he was just dropping by for a neighborly chat. But his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. He surveyed the brightly lit room, nodded once in approval, and then sat in a chair in the corner of the dining room, a spot from which he could see the front door and the entire living room, but where he himself was not immediately obvious. I made a pot of coffee, the familiar, domestic act of strange comfort amidst the tension. David sat at the kitchen island, sipping a mug, his large frame a silent promise of protection. Ethan and Liam stood together near the living room window, peering out into the dark street. They weren't speaking, but they were standing shoulder to shoulder, closer than they had been in years. This was my army, a contractor, a retired cop, and 2 scared boys. It wasn't much, but it was my family. And it was all we had. Right on time. Headlights swept across the front of the house. A dark, nondescript sedan pulled into our driveway. He's here, Ethan said, his voice tight. My heart hammered against my ribs. The moment was here. Okay, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. Everyone, remember the plan. Liam, you answer the door. Alone. Ethan, you stay in his line of sight. But back here. David, George, you stay quiet until I say so. Let me handle the talking. I took my place in the center of the brightly lit living room, standing tall, my hands clasped behind my back to hide their shaking. The doorbell rang. The sound was sharp, aggressive, cutting through the silence. Liam walked to the door like a man walking to the gallows. He took one last look back at me, his eyes pleading. I gave him a firm nod. You can do this. He opened the door. Vince was exactly as I'd imagined him from the phone call. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a hard, cruel face and dead eyes. He was wearing a dark leather jacket and a smug, predatory smile. He was expecting a terrified kid to hand him a bag of cash. He was not expecting what he saw. He stepped inside, his eyes sweeping the room. The smug smile faltered. He saw the rearranged furniture. He saw the blaze of lights. He saw me. standing in the center of the room, waiting for him. His eyes flickered past me and saw Ethan, standing silently by the kitchen doorway. He hadn't seen David or Mr. Henderson yet, but he could feel it. The atmosphere was wrong. This wasn't the scared, dark house he'd anticipated. This wasn't a simple collection. This was a stage. And he had just walked into the spotlight. "What's this?" he said, his voice losing some of its gravelly confidence. He looked at Liam. "I told you to be alone." "He is alone," I said, my voice ringing out in the quiet room. "He's with his family." Vince's head snapped toward me. His eyes narrowed. He was sizing me up. The mom? The soft target. He tried to reclaim his power, his lips curling into a sneer. "You must be the school counselor," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You should have taught your kid not to make promises he can't keep. Where's my money?" This was it. The high water mark. The moment the tide would turn. "There is no money," I said clearly. The sneer vanished, replaced by a flash of pure fury. "What did you say?" "You heard me. There is no money. Not tonight. Not ever." I took a step forward, my fear a distant echo, drowned out by a fierce, protective rage. "This is over. You will not contact my son again. You will not contact my family again. You will walk out of this house, and you will disappear from our lives." He let out a short, sharp laugh of disbelief. "You're crazy. You think you're in a position to make demands? You have no idea who you're dealing with." He took a menacing step toward me. "And you have no idea who you're dealing with," I shot back. "You think you're the only one with associates?" On cue, my brother David rose from his seat at the kitchen island and walked into the living room, folding his massive arms across his chest. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, a mountain of quiet menace. Vince stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes widened slightly as he took in David's size. His gaze flickered around the room again, paranoia dawning. "Who else was here? And I believe you've forgotten," I continued, my voice cold as ice, "that making threats for the purpose of extortion is a felony. Issuing threats of violence is a felony. You run a gambling operation that preys on young, vulnerable people. That's a whole list of felonies." From the dining room, Mr. Henderson spoke, his voice the calm, authoritative tone of a man who had spent 30 years commanding respect. "He's right, son. Racketeering charges carry a hefty sentence." He stepped out of the shadows, holding his thermos. "Sergeant Henderson. Retired. I'm sure some of my old friends down at the Organized Crime Unit would be very interested to hear all about your business model." Vince was trapped. The color had drained from his face. The predator had become the prey. He was surrounded, exposed. The shadows he operated in stripped away by the bright lights of my living room. He looked from David's imposing frame to Mr. Henderson's steely gaze, and then to me. The fear he was so used to inspiring was now reflected in his own eyes. He had two choices: escalate the violence against overwhelming odds in a room with a retired cop, or cut his losses. He made the smart choice. Without another word, he backed away slowly, his eyes darting between us. Turned, fumbled with the doorknob for a second, and then practically fled from the house. We watched as his car hastily backed out of the driveway, tires squealing on the pavement as he sped away into the night. The silence he left behind was different. It was clean. It was victorious. Liam slumped against the wall, a choked sob of pure relief escaping him. Ethan rushed to his side, putting a hand on his brother's shoulder. David let out a long, low whistle. Mr. Henderson simply took a sip from his thermos and gave me a small, approving smile. I stood there, in the center of my living room, my body trembling with the adrenaline crash. We had done it. We had faced the monster in the dark. And we had won. But the battle was only half over. The immediate threat was gone. But the wounds it had left on our family were still wide open. The squeal of Vince's tires faded into the night, leaving a profound and ringing silence in its wake. For a moment, nobody moved. We were all suspended in the aftermath, breathing the clean air of a storm that had finally passed. The bright lights of the living room, which moments before had been our weapons, now just seemed harsh and exposing. Liam was the first to break. The tension that had held him upright for days, for weeks, finally snapped. He slid down the wall, his legs giving out from under him, and buried his face in his hands. The sounds that came from him weren't just sobs of relief. They were the gut-wrenching, soul-deep cries of someone who had hit rock bottom and survived. Ethan, without a word, knelt beside him. He didn't offer platitudes or reassurances. He just put his arm around his younger brother's shaking shoulders. A simple, solid gesture of presence. It was an act of forgiveness and reconciliation more powerful than any words could have been. My brother David walked over and squeezed my shoulder. "You okay, Sarah?" he asked, his voice soft. I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. My legs felt like jelly. "Thank you, David, for coming." "Always," he said simply. Mr. Henderson screwed the cap back on his thermos. "Well," he said, with the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, "I don't think you'll be hearing from that young man again. People like that, they're bullies. They thrive on easy targets. You just made it clear you're not an easy target." He walked over and patted my arm. "You're a stronger woman than you think, Sarah. Your husband would have been proud." His words, meant as a comfort, were a gut punch of emotion. I thought of Mark, of his easy laugh and his belief that any problem could be solved with enough optimism. He never would have let it get this far. But he also would have been horrified by the risks I had just taken. I wasn't him. I had to find my own way to be strong. A different kind. Fiercer. More desperate kind. After my brother and Mr. Henderson had gone, the three of us were left alone in the rearranged living room. It felt like the morning after a terrible party. The adrenaline had completely worn off, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a fragile, uncertain peace. Liam had stopped crying. He was just sitting on the floor, his head leaning back against the wall, his eyes red and swollen. Ethan was still next to him, a silent guardian. It was time to talk. Not to accuse or rehash, but to rebuild. I sat down on the floor a few feet away from them, making us all equals. "Liam," I started gently, "look at me." He slowly lifted his head. The shame in his eyes was a physical thing, a heavy cloak he couldn't take off. "What happened tonight? We faced the threat outside this house," I said. "Now we have to face the sickness inside it. The gambling. It's an addiction. Sweetie, it's not a moral failure. It's an illness. And you can't fight it alone." He shook his head, a fresh wave of tears welling up. "I've cost you so much. The money, all the money Ethan gave me." His voice broke. He couldn't even look at his brother. "He sold things. Mom, Dad's things. For me." Ethan flinched, but didn't move. "I know," I said softly. "The money is gone. We can't change that. But it's just money. Can be earned again. What we can't afford to lose is you. What we can't afford to lose is us." I looked at Ethan. "You were trying to protect him. You were trying to protect me. I know your heart was in the right place, Ethan. But your secret-keeping almost broke us. To put a wall between you and me. And it enabled Liam's addiction to grow in the dark. We are a family. We share the burdens. All of them. You don't have to be the strong one all the time." Ethan finally looked at me, and I could see the release of that long-held responsibility in his eyes. It was like he could finally exhale after holding his breath for 3 years. He gave a small, shaky nod. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't empty or cold. It was thoughtful. It was the silence of a wound being cleaned before it can be stitched. Finally, Liam spoke, his voice hoarse. He was looking at Ethan. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, man. For everything. For the money. For the things I said. About Mom loving you more." He let out a weak, bitter laugh. "It's funny. I was so jealous. I thought you had it all so easy. The perfect son. The perfect life. I had no idea. I had no idea what you were doing for me. I was so stupid." Ethan looked at his brother. Really looked at him. For the first time in what felt like forever. "I wasn't perfect, Liam. I was just scared. I was scared of losing you. I was scared of failing Mom and Dad. I thought if I could just throw enough money at the problem, it would go away. I was stupid, too." It was the most honest conversation they had ever had. Stripped bare of all pretense and resentment, there was nothing left but two brothers, flawed and frightened, who loved each other. Liam struggled to his feet. He was unsteady, but he was determined. He walked over to the small table by the window where I had left the velvet box with my grandmother's locket. He picked it up and brought it to me. "I didn't sell this one," he said, his voice thick. "I couldn't. Every time I thought about it, I just couldn't." He pressed it into my hand. "It's all I have left to give back." I closed my hand around the small, cool box. This was the proof. This was the glimmer of hope I had clung to in the darkness of his room. The real Liam was still in there. "This is more than enough," I whispered. That night was the beginning. It wasn't the end of our problems, but it was the end of the secrets. The next day, I made an appointment with a therapist who specialized in gambling addiction. Liam went without protest. He was terrified, but he was willing. We sat down with the bills. All three of us this time. We made a budget. It was brutal. We would have to live on a shoestring for a long time. Liam, ashamed but resolute, got 2 jobs. He worked at the bookstore cafe in the mornings and washed dishes at a restaurant at night. Every paycheck, he would cash it and hand over almost all of it to Ethan, who had created a spreadsheet to track the repayment of the debt he was now shouldering. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the act of restitution. It was about rebuilding trust, $1 at a time. The house changed. The oppressive silence was replaced by quiet conversation. We ate dinner together every night, no matter how tired we were. Sometimes we talked about our day. Sometimes we just sat in comfortable silence. The anger and resentment had been lanced, and in its place, something new was beginning to grow. One Saturday, about a month after that terrible night, I found Ethan online, looking at used cars. They were modest, sensible sedans. Nothing like the sporty car he had been so proud of. I put a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry you had to sell your car, sweetie." He looked up at me and smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes. "It's just a car. Mom, you know what I realized? All that time, I thought having that car, having that good job, that was what made me a man. What made me responsible." He shook his head. "I was wrong. What we did, all of us, together, in that living room, that was being responsible. That felt more real than a car ever did." The healing was slow. It was not a straight line. There were hard days. Days when Liam came home exhausted and despondent. The urge to escape into the false promise of a jackpot whispering in his ear. Days when the financial strain felt suffocating. But we were no longer 3 separate islands of grief and anger. We were a unit. When Liam faltered, Ethan was there to steady him. When I felt overwhelmed, my sons were there to make me a cup of tea and listen. We were a family, scarred and broken in places, but we were whole. The ordeal had stripped us down to the studs, but it had forced us to build a new foundation. One based not on secrets and assumptions, but on a painful, beautiful, and unshakable truth. We had walked through the fire, and we had come out the other side. Together. The seasons turned. The harsh winds of autumn gave way to the quiet blanket of a Midwestern winter. And then, slowly, to the tentative green shoots of spring. Our lives found a new rhythm, one dictated by work schedules, therapy appointments, and the shared goal of digging ourselves out of the hole Liam's addiction had created. It was a monotonous, grueling rhythm at times, but it was steady. It was real. The change in Liam was the most profound. The sullen, angry boy who haunted the upstairs of our house was gone. In his place was a young man who was quiet, but not withdrawn. He was thoughtful. He looked people in the eye when he spoke to them. The physical toll of working too demanding, low-wage jobs was evident in the permanent tiredness around his eyes. But there was a new light in them, too. It was the light of purpose. He started talking about the future, not in the grandiose terms of a sure-bet investment, but in small, practical steps. He was interested in the culinary program at the local community college. He discovered, through the chaos of the restaurant kitchen, that he loved the order and creativity of cooking. It was something tangible, something he could control. For a man who had lost himself to the abstract chaos of numbers on a screen, the solid feel of a knife in his hand or the precise chemistry of baking was a salvation. Ethan, too, was transformed, freed from the self-imposed burden of being the family patriarch. He seemed to shed 10 years. He started going out with friends from work again. He joined a recreational soccer league. He laughed more. The spreadsheet where he tracked Liam's payments was still on his laptop, but it was no longer the central focus of his life. It was just one tab among many. One evening, I came home from work to find them in the kitchen together. Liam was showing Ethan how to properly chop an onion, guiding his hands. They were laughing about Ethan's clumsy attempts. The scene was so simple, so wonderfully normal, that it brought tears to my eyes. This was the family I had almost lost. This was the peace I had thought was gone forever. I didn't interrupt them. I just watched from the doorway, letting the moment sink into my soul. A balm on the old wounds. Our relationships were not perfect. The scars were still there. Sometimes, I would catch Liam staring into space, and I would feel a jolt of the old fear, wondering if he was thinking about the flashing lights of the online casino. Sometimes, Ethan would fall back into his old habit of trying to solve a problem for me before I'd even finished explaining it. And I'd have to gently remind him, I've got this. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I would lie awake in the memory of Vince's face. The coldness in his eyes would flash in my mind. I would think about the insane risk I took, the line I crossed. I had saved my family, but I had also summoned a darkness into my home that I could never fully forget. The knowledge that I was capable of such cold, calculated fury was a disquieting part of my new self. I was no longer just Sarah, the gentle school counselor. I was also the woman who stared down a violent criminal and didn't blink. I was still learning to live with both of those people inside me. About 6 months after that night, on a bright Saturday morning, Liam and Ethan called me into the living room. They were standing together, looking nervous and excited. On the coffee table was an envelope. It was not a plain white envelope like the one that had started this whole nightmare. This one was a cheerful blue. "What's this?" I asked, a familiar sense of apprehension pricking at me. "Open it," Liam said, a proud smile spreading across his face. Picked it up. Inside was a bank statement. I looked at the name on the account, Ethan and Liam Miller Repayment Fund. And I looked at the final balance, $0. 00. Below it, in the transaction history, was the final lump sum payment that had cleared the day before. He had done it. My son had paid back every last cent of the money Ethan had given him. I looked up, my eyes blurred with tears. I didn't know what to say. "It's done," Mom? Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. The debt is paid. Not all of it, Liam said quietly. He turned to his brother. The bravado and the shame were gone. All that was left was a deep, quiet sincerity. I can never repay you for what you really did for me, he said. For selling your car. For standing by me. For not giving up on me. Even when I'd given up on myself. I owe you a debt that isn't about money. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be a brother who deserves what you did. Ethan pulled him into a fierce hug. You already are. He mumbled into his brother's shoulder. I stood there and cried. But these were not tears of grief or fear. They were tears of overwhelming gratitude. My family had been to the brink and back. We had stared into the abyss. And instead of letting it swallow us, we had pulled each other out. A few weeks later, we were all in the backyard. The sun was warm. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. I was tending to my flower beds. My hands sunk into the rich, dark earth. Liam was at the grill, confidently flipping burgers, a smear of barbecue sauce on his cheek. He was telling a story about a disaster with a bechamel sauce at the restaurant, and he was laughing about it. Ethan drove up and parked his new car, a modest, reliable, and thoroughly sensible used sedan in the driveway. He got out, holding a small, potted sapling. What's that? I asked, wiping my brow. A peace offering, he said with a grin. For the backyard. We found a sunny spot near the edge of the property and, together, the three of us dug a hole. We placed the young tree into the earth, its fragile roots reaching down into the soil. As we packed the dirt around it, my hands worked alongside my son's. I looked at their faces, shining with sweat in the afternoon sun. I saw the man Liam was becoming, responsible, hardworking, and kind. I saw the man Ethan had become, strong, but gentle. His sense of duty now balanced with a lighter heart. And I saw myself, no longer just a widow defined by loss, but a mother defined by a fierce, unrelenting love. We were not the same people we were a year ago. The old version of our family was gone, burned away in a trial by fire. But from those ashes, something new had grown. Something stronger. Something truer. We were survivors. We were a family, replanted and reaching for the sun. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that our roots would hold.